Hello everyone, I am the storyteller. Tonight, I'll tell you a story soaked in dread and shadow and experience that changed Mark forever after he accepted a simple job watching over a remote desert chapel. Settle and listen closely to the wind whispering through the sand and discover what was waiting when the sun went down. I write this not to convince you, nor to warn you, but because I cannot hold the thing in my mind alone any longer. My name, though I expect little consequence in giving it, is Dr. Daniel Ashcroft, professor of religious anthropology at the University of Chicago, and once a skeptic in all things divine. I have seen what I should not have, what we were never meant to, and in writing, I attempt futilely perhaps to exorcise the image of the infinite mouth in the sky. It began 3 months ago with a letter postmarked from a settlement I had never heard of, Grieve, New Mexico. The envelope was sun-stained, its return address penned in a shaky, all-dark script that smelled faintly of salt and coal tar. Inside was only a photo and 3 words handwritten on the back. He speaks again. The photo depicted a rough wooden chapel in the middle of desert nowhere. A red sun hung low and gibbous in the background, casting a vertical beam of light that seemed through some failure of the old lens to pierce the clouds like a blade. I saw no one in the picture, yet I felt eyes on me. I should have ignored it, I know that. But then I saw his name at the bottom corner of the photograph burned into the fiber like a watermark, Elias Grieve. Elias was a name whispered in academic halls, buried under apostate footnotes and expunged citations. A self-styled prophet in the 1880s, who led a Western sect into the Jornada del Muerto desert, never to return. His doctrine, dubbed the Mouth Doctrine, was a tangled fusion of Protestant esotericism and something far older antediluvian symbols grafted onto Scripture like tumors on a vine. He claimed the Lord had taken new shape, that the second coming would not walk, but descend. And so, against all reasonable instinct, I traveled to New Mexico. Grieve was not on any modern map. I found it only by cross-referencing 1930s geological surveys with long-defunct railway timetables. The place sat within a natural amphitheater of jagged, rust-red stone, ringed by plateaus that warped perspective the closer one drew to them. They called the formation Las Orejas del Silencio, the ears of silence. A fitting name. My cell service died 10 miles out, and the road devolved into something neither asphalt nor gravel, just packed dirt that pulsed with residual heat even after the sun dipped below the horizon. The town itself was wrong, not just in age, which was considerable, but in orientation. Streets branched at odd angles, houses faced away from the central square, and the steeple of the chapel leaned ever so slightly east, as though bowing toward some invisible force in the sands beyond. I arrived just before dusk, and was greeted by Sister Calhoun, an elderly woman with skin like wine-chafed leather and eyes as pale as quartz. She wore a prairie dress that might have been woven a century ago, and a sun hat so wide it shadowed her entire torso. You came, she rasped, without surprise, just as it was told. I asked who had written me. She only smiled. He speaks through many mouths. They put me in the old schoolhouse, 1 room, single cot, wood stove, and a row of rusted desks stacked like bones. A crude crucifix of twisted iron hung above the door. but it was wrong, its proportions subtly off, the vertical shaft curving backward at the top like a shepherd's crook. I told myself I would leave the next day. I didn't. The first rule was explained at supper. Do not look west after dark, Sister Calhoun said plainly, ladling pale stew into my bowl. If you hear the bell, pray. If you hear the bell and see light, pray louder. I asked her what she meant. She paused, tilting her head. You're an educated man, she said, so don't pretend not to understand boundaries. I couldn't sleep that first night, the desert breath with a deep, rhythmic exhale that pushed dust through the cracked floorboards. I heard movement, not footsteps, but something heavier sliding, wriggling, the kind of sound you don't expect to hear from something big. Then the bell rang. It wasn't a church bell, not exactly. More like a deep, metallic groan, as if some massive thing beneath the earth were shifting in its sleep. The sound reached inside me, squeezed my lungs, and brought a sudden pressure behind my eyes. My cot rattled. The old school maps on the wall trembled. I rose and went to the window. The west faced the steeple. I remembered the rule, but still I looked. There was light. Not moonlight nor torch. This was vertical, rigid, a narrow line of pure light that rose from the desert horizon like a column of bleach poured through the sky. It shimmered as if submerged in water, and though I told myself it was a mirage, I could feel heat and salt in my nostrils, and the faint sound of chanting, not from mouths, but from stone. I did not sleep. The next morning, I interviewed a boy named Jonas, perhaps 12 years old, with wild eyes and a mouth that never quite closed. He told me he'd seen the sky open once. It screamed, he whispered. It screamed at my papa until his blood ran backward. They buried him with his ears in his hands. There were other rules. I found them carved into the chapel's inner wall, not in English or Spanish, but in an older, looping glyph script that seemed to bleed when stared at too long. I copied what I could, the rules of the Western silence. 1. Do not face west after sundown. 2. If the light comes, keep your eyes shut and your mouth full of soul. 3. Never ask who the preacher is. 4. Do not speak when the hymn begins, only echo. 5. If you see a stranger wearing your face, let it pass. 6. The steeple leans east because he watches from there. 7. Blood before dawn seals the day. 8. Those who forget the prayer must sleep beneath the chapel. I asked Calhoun about them. They're not rules. She said they're bindings. That night I made my first mistake. I recorded audio during the twilight service. Not openly, I left the recorder hidden beneath a pew. The sermon was delivered by a preacher I never saw. The pulpit remained empty, yet a voice came, deep, not loud, but heavy, like it hung in the air rather than traveled through it. The congregation repeated every word in unison, but I noticed their mouths weren't moving. When I played back the tape later in the schoolhouse, I heard none of the sermon, just one phrase, repeated 32 times. The mouth is not a wound, the mouth is not a wound. The mouth is not a wound, until the recorder hissed and cracked, and the device split open like something inside had swollen and burst. I awoke that night to find red sand pouring from the ceiling cracks, though the roof had not broken. My fingernails were bleeding. A shape stood outside the window, tall, thin, wrong. Its skin was smooth and jointless. Like wax, it had no mouth. just folds where a mouth might once have been. But as I watched, those folds pulled back, and in the space where a mouth should have been, there was only sky. Stars, wrong stars, moving stars, and a sound like a bell made of meat. Then it was gone. I can't leave. The car won't start. The road out has collapsed into a salt pit where no salt ever was. Calhoun says the revival has begun, and Elias walks again beneath the chapel. I think she means it literally. I hear the voice now, even as I write this. It says the name Ashcroft was spoken once before in this place, that I came not to witness, but to replace. And the children sing the hymn in my sleep. They sing it with my voice. I've stopped dreaming in silence. Sleep brings the hymn now low and nasal, repeating syllables not meant for human throat. I wake with the taste of iron on my tongue, soul beneath my fingernails, and words etched into my skin. Not scratches, not bruises, writing, as though the letters surface from beneath the flesh, not carved upon it. This morning it read, "You were chosen before you were born." I tried to wash it away. Scalding water, steel wool, nothing worked. The marks only faded when I entered the chapel again willingly. The townspeople say little, and always in partial truths. Their lives revolve around preparation, though for what? No one admits. They clean the chapel floor with salt water. They feed the desert animals blood-soaked bread. They leave milk and bone, the 4 crossroads outside town, always 4, always at dusk, and they speak the name Elias like it's not a person, but a place. I met Isaac Rowe that day, a newcomer like myself, though a decade younger and full of arrogant certainty. Isaac claimed to be writing a book on frontier religion. He carried 3 cameras, a notebook, and a revolver, all of which he made visible at every opportunity. "I'm not afraid of backwoods superstition," he said, flipping through yellow clippings. "Grieve is just a pocket of myth that refused to die." He showed me a map he'd drawn, streets, buildings, perimeters. It was carefully rendered, mathematically clean. But the scale was wrong. The center of town was larger inside than it was outside. I don't mean that poetically. The dimensions literally fail to match. When we walked it together, the square stretched longer than possible. Houses shifted orientation slightly every time we turned our backs. Isaac didn't believe me at first. Then we saw the chapel door open from the inside with no one there. That night, Sister Calhoun invited me to a private gathering beneath the chapel. She used the phrase "the third silence." I didn't know what it meant. I followed anyway. The basement was cool, not in temperature, but in feeling like an absence of heat, a vacuum of warmth that numbed the fingertips and stilled the breath. Dozens had gathered in a circle, surrounding a figure robed in what looked like flayed skin stitched together with hair and salt wire. I never saw the face. The voice came from the ceiling. It wasn't spoken. It was embedded in our thoughts, like a memory planted while dreaming. They brought out the book of hollow names, bound in black hide. The pages inside weren't paper, but some form of calcified membrane, semi-translucent and pulsing faintly. Every page contained a single name, but not in any human language. Symbols rotating, floating just above the flesh. Sister Calhoun instructed us each to stare at a name, then speak our own aloud in return. Most obeyed. I didn't. When it was my turn, I remained silent, and the page folded in on itself, shriveling like burnt parchment. They all turned to look at me, After the gathering, I returned to the schoolhouse to find my notes soaked not with water, but something thicker, amber-colored, sticky. Reeking of copper and mildew, my recordings were gone. In their place, a single page had been nailed to the wall with a rusted nail through a desiccated finger bone. On the page, my name, and beneath it, half seen, half heard, next to be hallowed. I wanted to flee. I did. I packed. I walked the perimeter of town under cover of starlight, though the stars above Grieve did not match any map I knew. Orion bent sideways, the moon had a vertical scar, and the silence between winds carried the distinct texture of whispering lips pressed against skin. But the desert would not let me go. The road curved in on itself. I walked for hours and found myself back at the chapel, without memory of turning. My phone displayed a timer, not a clock. It ticked upward in intervals of 13 seconds. Isaac was waiting for me, pale, eyes bloodshot. He'd found something in the archives beneath the mayor's office. Though Grieve had no visible government, he'd uncovered a journal dated October 1937. The author, a nurse from a traveling medical mission. Her entries were lucid, calm, rational, until they weren't. The children whisper the same phrase in sleep. The preacher was never born. The preacher was dug up. Found a man yesterday buried in sand with just his mouth exposed. It smiled all night, even after it stopped breathing. They say you're not a citizen here until you've been seen from below. The final page had only a drawing, a rough sketch of a figure with no eyes, no limbs, just a torso with a vertical mouth from crown to navel, open wide, swallowing a line of kneeling townsfolk. At the bottom, scrawled in red, "He returns in the year of the third gibbous cross." Isaac translated that to 2025. The next rule came that evening. On the third night, bury your ears beneath the floorboards and wait for the ringing. If your blood runs warm, you are safe. If your breath turns black, lie flat and do not speak, even if your name is called. I did as told. Mostly, I didn't bury my ears. I used earplugs, chalking it up to ritual theater ... at 3:33 a.m. I woke gasping, not because of sound, but its absence. A pressure built behind my eardrums, until I could feel them pulsing in time with something beneath the schoolhouse. The earth seemed to hollow beneath me, expanding, breathing. Then came the bell, and with it, something else. A shape moved outside, vast, low to the ground, but taller than the rooftops. No feet. It flowed, slick and translucent. I could not see it directly, only the way it erased light in its wake, casting shadows where none should be. Then it spoke, not aloud, but in my chest, in my spine, in the deepest, oldest language the human body understands. Pain. Daniel Ashcroft, you were named for the silence. Speak it and be spared. Deny it and be hallowed. I don't know what the silence is, but I know it is older than words, older than Elias, older than time measured forward. This morning, I found Isaac at the edge of the salt pit, eyes black, mouth sewn shut with his own hair. On his chest, carved deep and ritualistic, he looked west. He asked questions. He mapped the impossible. His notebook was gone, but the last page remained jammed between his teeth. It read, "The preacher wears no skin but yours." Isaac Rowe's body was gone by noon. No funeral, no word from the townsfolk. When I asked Sister Calhoun She only said he was weighed and found wanting. His echo will linger. I pressed her, demanded answers. She turned to me, smiling with something behind her teeth. "Didn't they tell you?" she whispered. "The ground here is not for burying. It remembers too well. I went to the salt pit where I last saw Isaac. The sand was smooth, undisturbed, but my boots crunched on something brittle, almost hidden beneath the topsoil fingernails. A dozen or more, still wet at the base, arranged in a circle around a depression in the ground shaped like an open mouth. That night I slept with a knife beneath my pillow. I dreamed of a stairwell descending from the chapel's pulpit, a spiral made not of stone, but vertebrae human, and otherwise slick with something warm. The fourth rule arrived at dawn, carved into the side of the schoolhouse in long, looping strokes that hadn't been there the night before. If the chapel door opens by itself, close your eyes. If the stairs appear, descend. Do not bring light. Do not name what you see. I considered it nonsense. Then I woke up on the chapel steps. I don't recall leaving the schoolhouse. My clothes were dusted with ash. My hands smelled like meat left too long in the sun, and the chapel door was ajar. Inside, the pulpit stood empty, but the altar had changed. Its shape was more fluid, as though it had been recently softened and reshaped. Beneath it, where there had been only flooring before, was now a dark, narrow spiral descending into the earth. The stairwell, I descended. The first 30 feet were silent, dust windless air, and stone carved by something with many fingers. Symbols adorned every wall, twisting glyphs that rippled when I looked away, vibrating like insect wings when I dared focus. The temperature dropped, but not in a natural gradient. It jumped, my breath crystallized, then vanished entirely. I descended 13 full rotations before I reached the bottom. And there it stood. The chapel under the sand is not a structure. It is an imprint, a negative space in the stone, like a fossilized cathedral pressed into the earth from above. Pews shaped from calcified sinew, a pulpit of hollowed bone, and above it, a stained glass window with no light source. Behind it only darkness that moved. I was not alone. In the far pews sat figures in moving, their skin translucent like parchment stretched over thin frames. Eyeless, but watching, they rocked back and forth in unison, whispering syllables I could not parse until I realized they were speaking backward, not in reverse audio, but in reversed causality. Their words arrived before their mouths moved. Then one rose. It wasn't a man, not truly. It had been, once. Its face bore remnants of beard and weather-worn skin, but the eyes had been replaced with black orbs that absorbed light completely. Its chest bore a vertical scar, stitched with glass and wire, pulsing gently. It spoke directly into me. Elias never died. He was read aloud until he became real again. You are the fifth. The mouth must be filled. I asked what it wanted. The figure smiled, or mimicked the idea of it. You already gave permission when you copied your name into the book. I told him I hadn't. He pointed toward my chest. And then I remembered the writing on my skin. I fled. I don't recall how I ascended the stairs. I only remember bursting into daylight, coughing sand bleeding from my ears. But when I returned to the schoolhouse, I found something waiting, a box wrapped in black linen, tied with human hair. Inside, a page, one I did not write, but in my handwriting it read, Day 5. The replacement is taking root. The dream is no longer metaphor, and below it the new preacher will come barefoot. His name will be the word that eats itself. I don't know what that means, but I haven't worn shoes since. I tried burning the chapel that night. The flames caught briefly, but then reversed course, sucking into the walls with a deep inhalation that smelled of salt and rot. The steeple exhaled smoke shaped like fingers. The townsfolk watched without stopping me. No one intervened. Afterward, Sister Calhoun placed her hand on my shoulder. "It's part of the revival," she said. "Resistance confirms worth." I asked what the revival was reviving. She laughed. "You think he ever left?" I returned to the pit at midnight, just to see, and the earth was breathing. Not metaphorically, literally. The sand expanded and contracted in slow rhythm. I pressed my hand to it and felt pulse, like laying a palm against the inside of a throat. From beneath I heard the hymn again, but this time the voice singing was my own. I no longer count the days. They move without meaning here. The sky changes color without pattern, and the sun's arc is inconsistent. Some days it doesn't rise, others it sets 3 times. My watch stopped trying. I only marked time by the rules, and last night a new one arrived, scratched into my window pane from the outside. When the tower groans, do not look toward it. If you see the man watching, cover your eyes and speak your name backward. If you cannot remember your name, remain still. He cannot enter what is unclaimed. I had not noticed the tower before, but now I cannot not see it. It stands just beyond the eastern ridge, tall, narrow, and wrong, made of warped metal and bone-colored concrete. It should be a grain silo, but no one farms here. The fields are dead, salted from some ancient sin, yet the tower remains untouched by dust, untouched by age, and at its top, a window where someone always stands, watching. I asked Sister Calhoun about it. "That's not a tower," she said, folding laundry that reeked of brine. "That's a nail, and the man inside is the hammer." I demanded sense. She gave me scripture. When the sky cracked, he poured through the wound like all through cloth. Elias saw, and Elias spoke, and Elias was remade. He sent his watchers to count the named. The tower holds the first watcher, the one who remembers the shape of man. If he sees you, you belong to him. I resolved to investigate the tower. I do not know if this was my idea. The impulse came suddenly, as if installed. I awoke with boots on, coat button, and a voice in my head that wasn't mine, whispering, "We remember grain. We remember mouths of plenty. The path to the tower is not long, but the land shifts beneath the feet. Distances stretch, time falters, my legs ached with steps I couldn't recall taking. I passed a well that hadn't been there the day before. It whispered names. Then I reached the base. The grain tower is cold, not temperature absence. The closer I stood, the more my thoughts slowed, peeled back, detached. My memories lost edges. My name drifted from the front of my mind. I entered. The inside was impossibly large. Stairs spiraled upward without visible support. The walls were lined with masks, hundreds, all identical, flat-faced, no eyes, just a mouth carved open in an expression of permanent scream. Each mask bore a single word etched on the forehead. Names? I found Isaac's. I found mine, but mine was blank. At the top, I saw him. The man in the window. He was not man. That is the closest shape he borrowed, tall, hairless, bent at angles the body cannot maintain. His skin was iridescent parchment, stretched too tightly over something much too large. Where his face should have been, there was a hole, not absence of void, depth without bottom. I could feel it pulling at me, not with gravity, but with recognition, as if it remembered me better than I remembered myself. It turned, and I remembered the rule. I covered my eyes too late. I don't know what he did to me, but I came down changed. My voice echoes when I am alone. Mirrors show me from slightly behind. Dogs will not look at me. I bleed salt water. Worst of all, I forget my name sometimes. When I wake, I must repeat it aloud. Daniel Ashcroft, Daniel Ashcroft, Daniel Ashcroft. But last night I said Elias. The townsfolk are beginning to treat me differently. They bow, they whisper when I pass. The children do not run from me anymore. They stare, they hum. Sister Calhoun offered me a new room in the chapel. It's nearly time, she said. The old tongue returns. We must raise the preacher in you. I asked her what that meant. She placed something in my hands. A mask, my face, screaming. That night the bell rang again, but it did not come from the chapel. It came from the sky. I went outside. I do not know why. Above, the clouds had parted into vertical lines, like slashes in the fabric of the world. Through them, blackness, not night, not void, something that watched, and from that blackness sound poured. A chant echoing in 100 dead dialects in my mother's voice and mine. The name must enter the grain, the preacher must be fed. The silence must have sound, and then I saw the man from the tower on the ground, closer, coming. I fled to the only place left, the pit. It welcomed me. The sand parted, the stairs appeared. I descended again. The air below was thicker now, breathing, mucosal. The chapel under the sand had changed. It was alive. The pews pulsed. The altar groaned. The stained glass window was gone in its place, a membrane that blinked, and he was waiting. Not Elias, not the man in the tower, the mouth. I cannot describe him, only the absence he creates. The way thought bends near him, the way language unravels. He looked at me and spoke not in sound, but in memory, and in that moment I remembered. I had been here before, I remember now. Not all at once, but in slashes, in bursts, like light through a cracked door. This isn't the first revival. It's the fifth. The mouth showed me, not in words, but in exposure. Memory unfolded like tissue in flame. I saw it, all of it. The first congregation in 1887, drawn west by Elias Grieve and the black sun he claimed to see beneath the ground. The second in 1932, when Dust Bowl wines reveal the buried chapel. The third in 1974, led by a man in military green who vanished after saying the chapel spoke in frequencies. The fourth in 1997, government contractors laying fiber line, gone feral by dawn. And now, me. Not an accident, never was. I am the fifth preacher, and I have preached before. I awoke lying at the base of the salt pit. Mouth filled with grit, tongue split down the middle like a serpent's. No blood, just dust. The sky above me was wrong. The stars form letters, not in English, not in human, but I could read them. The preacher is not born. He is returned. I stumbled into town. The people were waiting, rows of them, standing in the square, silent, smiling. Each held a mask. Not just of my face now, but of every face I had worn, past revivals, past selves. They lifted the masks as one and placed them over their own. The crowd became me, or some echo of me, ... and from their mouths came a single phrase, repeated. We open the mouth that silence may feed. We open the mouth that silence may feed. Sister Calhoun took my hand, her skin peeled as she touched me, revealing not blood but pages, sheets of text written in ink that writhed, each finger an epistle, each word screaming. Come now, Elias, she said. It's almost time. I said nothing, because something in me agreed. They led me to the chapel. Inside, the altar had shifted again, less an object, now more an orifice, a gaping, moist indentation in the wood and bone, pulsing with anticipation. Above it, a mirror had appeared, but the reflection did not match the room. It showed a different chapel, older, rotted, on fire, but filled with the same congregation. Their mouths were moving, mine wasn't. Yet I heard my voice. I was preaching. They dressed me in the vestments of the preacher. Not cloth, skin, not tanned, not stitched, just loose, translucent, warm. It fused to my arms like oil, threading into my pores with language I had never learned, but now understood. They anointed me with dust, with ash, with blood from beneath the steeple floor, and they gave me the 9th rule, the one reserved for the preacher alone. Speak only when the mouth is open. Never name what listens. Never ask whose voice is yours. I spoke. I don't know what I said, but the wind changed direction. The sky parted vertically, and the tower groaned. The 5th revival had begun. They buried the children up to their necks in the four corners of town. A rite, they said, the innocent must anchor the circumference. I tried to object. My mouth did not obey. My tongue moved in circles. Words came out in reverse. I watched myself kneel before the steeple. I watched myself slit my own palm and pour blood onto the chapel's threshold. I watched myself open my arms to the sky, and I saw the mouth descend. It was not a being, it was a hole in the world, a vertical wound between clouds, opening wider than physics allows. Inside, stars that shouldn't exist, a sun that blinked, and teeth miles long, revolving, but no body, just hunger. And from it came a phrase, Ashcroft, you are the last name we needed. Speak the N-word, open the throat of the world. I tried to scream, but I was no longer holding my throat. Something else was. The townspeople fell prostrate. The masks melted into their faces. The children began to sing not in fear, but in joy, a song older than mammals, a rhythm buried in the marrow of creation. It bled from their mouths in pulses of black mist that fed upward into the mouth, and then the preacher came forward. Not me, the original, Elias Grieve, or something wearing him. His face was a loop, his hands were spirals, his voice was mine in reverse, saying things I hadn't said yet. He placed his hand on my chest and whispered, "You're doing well." I awoke hours later, alone, the town deserted, not abandoned, emptied. No footprints, no remains, just silence and salt, and the tower, where someone else now stood in the window, wearing my face. There's no one left in Grieve, no sound, no movement, no bodies, only me. And the sky, it watches now. That is not metaphor, it watches. I feel it in my marrow, a pressure, like being observed from the inside out. Every step I take, it follows. Every breath measured. The sun hangs still in the air, a bloated and moving disk, not red, not yellow, white, like bone bleach, too long in the open. Clouds gather at the edges of the sky in vertical stacks, like pillars holding up nothing. And above it all, high above, where the blue should be, is a thin vertical slit, still open, still watching. I went to the chapel. The stairs beneath it are gone now, sealed, as if they never existed. The stained glass membrane above the altar is torn, flapping gently even though the air is still. From behind it comes breathing, slow, rhythmic, mimicking mine. I do not know if it's echoing me or if I'm echoing it. The next rule came in my handwriting, carved into the schoolhouse desk. When the sky turns white and the birds vanish, do not speak your name aloud. Names are keys. The mouth listens through the sky. I said nothing, but I thought my name, and the sky twitched. I tried to leave. Pack, supplies, water, compass. Followed the old path east. Walked for hours. The tower vanished behind me, but so did the road, and the sun, and the shadows. I walked into a flat. Endless white, no horizon, no sky, just textureless ground and an overhead glow. My steps made no sound, the crunch of salt gone, the wind absent. Then I heard a voice behind me say, "You forgot your shadow." I turned. No one was there except me, facing me, smiling, and behind that me, a sky full of teeth. I ran. I don't remember how long. When I returned to the town, the chapel was upside down. Literally its steeple plunged into the earth like a nail. The structure above curled skyward like an opened jaw. Inside, pews hung from the ceiling like ribs. The altar floated in air, dripping black ichor that evaporated before touching the floor, and in the center, the book of hollow names, open. Its pages moved on their own. Each page bore a name. Some were in glyphs, some were in blood. One was singing, mine glowed faintly. The ink trembled, then vanished. A voice spoke from the steeple hole, "You are not named now. You are not anchored. You belong to the sky." I don't sleep anymore, not because I can't, because he dreams through me. When I close my eyes, I see old congregations. I see rituals performed by bone-white figures without mouths. I see fire raining upward. I see earth folding back to reveal the inside-out cathedral, and I always see the sky looking back. Not the sun, not the stars, the eye. It opened wider last night, and when it did, the ground beneath the chapel began to speak. Not in words and names, over and over, my voice, other voices, names I don't know, but all with the same rhythm. Elias, Elias, Elias. And the voices weren't calling to Elias, they were becoming him. I went to the tower. It was different. The structure now pulsed, breathed. Its surface shimmered like hot metal, though it was cold to the touch. At its base, a door had formed. No knob, no hinges, just a mouth-shaped slit. It opened when I approached. Inside, the walls moved, not visibly, but perceptually. Ankles bent wrong, ceilings fluctuated. My steps repeated, each footfall echoed before I made it. I climbed, no stairs now. Just a ladder of ribs at the top. The man, no longer watching from the window, waiting. His face is mine, but stretched. His skin hums like a taut drum. His fingers are longer now, ending in dull points. He spoke in my voice, but broken into syllables rearranged. You are the sky's anchor, you are the preacher unpeopled. The eye is blind until named. And then he handed me something, a mask, not of my face, but of something else, something I've never seen. Yet it knows me. I took it. He vanished. I descended. The town was gone. Only the sky remained above me. The slit widened, and for the first time I heard it speak, a language not made of sound but of intention. It didn't say words, it said truths. That I was always here, that I am not a man, but a carrier, that the sky does not look down to judge. It looks down to remember. I don't remember writing this, but it's here, the words are here. My hands move without permission, and the ink does not blot. The sky opened again last night fully this time. No slit, no suggestion, just exposure. A wound in the firmament, vertical, endless, wet. From it came the sound of throats clearing, stretch over miles, the mass inhalation, as if the very heavens prepared to speak through lungs that had never tasted air. And then it did, not with a word, with a number 13. There were always 12 before, 12 voices in the hymn, 12 faces in the stained glass, 12 names carved into the altar. I remember counting them, I remember writing them down, but today there are 13, and I am the 13th. The town is still gone, but not empty. It has become a shell, a husk with no origin. Streets no longer lead anywhere. Buildings have shifted inward, curling toward the chapel like fingers closing into a fist. Every window shows the same scene now, the inside of the tower, no matter where I look. Even the schoolhouse where I first slept now has pews in it, and my handwriting across the ceiling. The preacher preaches inward. The book of hollow names has changed, too. It no longer waits in the chapel. It follows me. Every room I enter, it's already there, resting on the floor, pages turning without wine, always open to the same page, a new name, never mine, but one I know deep in the root of my skull. Dr. Daniel Elias Ashcroft. I never had a middle name, but I do now. I remember things I never lived, standing in the pit during the 1932 revival, screaming as ash fell like snow, carving sigils into the back of my own eyelids, preaching to an audience that wore no skin, singing the hymn with a voice that bowed the sand. I remember becoming Elias. I remember becoming the mouth. It began, I now know, with a sound, a tone no human was ever meant to hear, a frequency that folds thought, the original unword. Elias heard it first, not with ears, with bone deep in his skull, a pressure that resolved into instructions. Build the chapel, shape it from repetition, carve the name backward, bury the voice beneath it, then teach others to listen. Each revival, a new conductor, a new preacher. Each one taught the unword a little better. Each one peeled a little further, and now I am the 13th voice, the one meant not to speak the hymn, but to become it. I cannot trust mirrors anymore. They show too much, not just my face, not just movement that doesn't match. They show layers, 12 layers, each one a version of me, each one wearing a different era, one in wool and dust, one in uniform, one with surgical gloves, one with a collar and stitched lips, all staring, all mouthing the same phrase. We are not Elias. Elias is us. The sky speaks more often now. It no longer waits for night. Midday splits like a cracked tooth, and light that is not light spills down. When it touches the ground, Plants die, rocks melt, time reverses for insects. I watched a fly hatch and vanish back into larval curl. Where the light lands, shapes rise. They look like people until you look too long. Then they look like ideas trying to remember what flesh is. They do not speak, they repeat. Yesterday, one touched me, its fingers were ideas. I don't know how else to explain it. I remembered its entire existence in a moment. Born from worship, fed by tension, named once in 1887 by a dying child who saw the real sky and went blind smiling. It told me nothing, but I knew what it wanted to sing. The final rule came this morning, scrawled on my chest, burned into me backwards in salt. Do not finish the 13th verse. If you reach the end, you will not return. The mouth will turn inward. You will become the silence that listens. I am trying not to sing, but I know the words, and they want out. The chapel's pulpit has been replaced with a throat, an open, wet column of ribbed flesh, vertical, pulsing, wheezing with breath I do not own. The townsfolk are back now, but different. Hollow, thin, their eyes are mirrors, they do not blink. They move like foam running at the wrong frame rate. Each holds a candle that drips upward. Each one chants a single note, 12 tones, waiting for the 13th. I have not slept in 3 days, but I am tired of resisting, and the book is open again. Only one page left, my name, but this time written inward, as if the letters spiral into the paper, into me, into the mouth. Tonight I will go to the tower. I will climb, I will look at the sky, and I will sing the 13th verse. If you hear it, do not repeat it. I climbed at dusk, though the word dusk means little now. The sky above Grieve no longer obeys the sun. It burns from within, as if lit by coals behind a veil of thin flesh. Day and night have merged into a single pulsing redness that stains the horizon like an infected wound. I carried nothing but the mask, the 13th mask. It doesn't resemble anything that ever lived. The tower had changed. No longer a silo, no longer architecture. It was a column of memory, its walls breath. Its skin shimmered with events, not images, moments, looped tragedies, silent births, songs sung in reverse in languages that never form naturally. As I ascended, each step hummed, each rung of bone thrummed with harmonic dissonance, like wind through a dying throat. I didn't tire, I didn't breathe. Time halted at the threshold. Because the tower is not a place, it is a note. At the top, the room was no longer enclosed. Just open air, suspended above a sky that rippled like water held upside down. The eye was above or below, orientation lost meaning, and waiting in the center, the choir of 12. They stood in a circle, shrouded in shadow, but wearing bodies that flickered, some mine, some not, some in between. Their mouths were closed, but their throats were open, slits running down the length of their chests, vibrating softly. They were not alive in any biological sense. They were held in song, and they turned to me as one. Each one took a step forward and placed a finger on my forehead. Each name entered me not as sound, but as absence. I forgot how to write, I forgot how to spell. I forgot the shape of the alphabet. Language peeled back, only melody remained. They backed away. The center of the tower opened downward, a spiral of vocal cords descending into the earth or above it, or through it. I walked to the edge. The final rule echoed faintly from deep within. Do not finish the 13th verse. But I was already singing. The words were not mine. They came from somewhere between thought and memory. Open the mouth that was stitched in stars. Fold the sky like linen soaked in names. Lead the hymn across the dirt. Make the preacher many. Each line widened the eye. The choir began to dissolve, turning to vapor, to sound, to idea. Their chests burst open not with gore, but with tone. And from the holes came versions of me, some bald, some aged, one crawling, one entirely made of tongue. They circled me, sang with me, they sang me. The tower bent, not crumbled, bent, its walls folded inward, twisting in Euclidean contradiction, until it resembled a mouth yawning in all directions. Each rib became a tooth, each window became a pupil. I stood in the uvula of the tower that sang itself, and I finished the 13th verse. Everything inverted, the sky turned inside out. The eye blinked once, and then silence. Not quiet, not stillness, true silence. The kind that hurts, the kind that strips. Sound stopped being real. My heartbeat vanished, my breathing ended. Even the friction of my feet against the floor produced no vibration. And then the voice came, the only one allowed to speak in silence. The voice that owns all names. You are the 13th. You are the hymn's throat. You are not a man. You are a memory of shape, dreaming of bones. Double quotes, we sang you into existence. Now you will sing us back. Speak the final reversal. I felt the name in my mouth, Elias, but not said forward. Sail, the N-word, the one that undoes. I screamed it, and the sky tore. From the tear came not light nor shadow, but understanding that we are not beings, we are phrases, complex utterances of an unknowable tongue, given breath for a limited span before we are recited back into the dark. That Elias was not a man, but a recurring metaphor sung into flesh 13 times, and I was the final chorus. The town of Grieve dissolved, its streets folded into sigils. Its buildings became syllables. The chapel sank into the tongue of the world. Only the tower remains now, not physical, but resonant, a tone that echoes wherever someone forgets their name. I am still here, but not as man, not as voice, as the pause between breaths. The moment before speaking, as the possibility of song, as the next revival. If you ever find yourself in the desert, if the sun sets twice in a single evening, if your reflection mouths things you didn't say, if a letter arrives with your name burned into it, do not answer, do not sing, do not speak, because the 13th voice is still echoing, and it's learning your melody. I exist now in fragments. I am not a man, I am residue, a film of sound left clinging to the stone ribs of the tower, a name smeared across time like oil across parchment, and the salt remembers me. Grieve is gone, not abandoned, not destroyed, unwritten. Like a sentence struck from the record, its existence now lies only in the aftertaste of geography. The land no longer maps, the coordinates spiral. Satellites glitch when crossing its orbit. Planes disappear and flying to near, only to return weeks later with no crew. But the salt remains, drifting across the desert in sheets, collecting in veins beneath the earth, rising in pillars after windless nights. It forms shapes, human almost, and sometimes me. I saw one yesterday, formed entirely of salt and sand, standing at the old chapel's outline. It bore my stance, my posture, even the way I once held my pen. It stood still for a full hour, then opened its mouth and sang. The voice was my own, cracked, distant, as if played through old wax. The words were not human, but they held intention. I did not understand the language, but I felt what it meant. The name returns, the sky requires a vessel. Salt remembers what water forgets. Each revival leaves traces. I see that now. The first left bones, the second left ash, the third left echoes in photographs that shouldn't exist. The fourth left a hum in the power lines near old fiber optic stations. The fifth left me ... and I am still leaking. Into the world, into others. Those who dream of the desert now find themselves humming upon waking. A tune they cannot place, a rhythm older than language. They call it deja vu, but it's not. It's me. The salt speaks in memory. I've seen it. It etches glyphs into windows. It traces rules across the chests of newborn calves. It settles in shapes that should not form naturally, like an alphabet written by wind and regret. I found the sixth preacher last week. She doesn't know it yet, but she's already hearing the chord. She teaches religious folklore at a small college in Montana. Her name is Claire Dorman. Her thesis advisor disappeared in 2007 after researching a town no one else remembered. She just requested access to Elias Grieve's banned sermons. She's starting to dream of vertical light, and the town is reforming, slowly, piece by piece. Salt coalesces into beams, wind piles dust into walls, ants drag splinters into chapel shapes. Even the tower has returned, not visibly, not in structure, but in sound. There is a low tone now, detectable only by malfunctioning radios, heard best at 3:13 a.m. It speaks not in words, but absence, and those who hear it report seeing a face in static, always the same, mine. I have become a precursor, a reagent in the chemistry of belief. I do not return in flesh. I return in architecture, and impulse. And the moment someone chooses to say, "That's odd, this town wasn't on the map," they are beginning to dig again. Construction crews, rail expansion project, a new highway, arcing through the New Mexico desert, cutting through what was once Grieve. They unearthed salt columns, photographed symbols on the stone, filed reports about a warped grain tower no longer standing. The foreman disappeared 2 days ago. Left a message on his laptop. The mouth must open again. I have heard the 13th tone. I know what's next. It always happens this way. It's already happening. Another choir will form. Another preacher will ascend. Another word will be uttered, and the sky will split anew, because the desert doesn't forget. The desert is the world's tongue, dry, cracked, waiting for the hymn. And I am still singing. He came to me last night, in the center of the white, burning horizon, barefoot, dressed in my clothes, but not walking, sliding, as if the ground itself carried him toward me. I knew him before he spoke, because he wore my hands, not just hands that resembled mine, my hands the mole on the thumb. The second knuckle I broke in a bar fight in '09, the crescent scarf and dissecting a dead raccoon as a teenager. They were mine, but the rest of him wasn't. His face was blurred, not motion blur, not low resolution, more like he hadn't decided on a face yet, flickering through versions of me, the one I was at 20, the one I'll be at 70, the one I would have been if I'd made different choices, and one I didn't recognize at all but which recognized me. He held out his arms, and I felt an ache, like looking in a mirror that knows too much. He spoke in my voice, but before I moved my mouth, the words arrived before the sound. You sang, so I am, you pealed, so I came. You're the end of the first, I'm the start of the next. He circled me as he did. The land changed. Structures rose from dust, first the schoolhouse, then the chapel, then the tower, but younger, not yet broken, still forming. He stepped into the chapel and whispered something I couldn't hear, and it opened its mouth. A scream came from beneath the altar, but not a scream of pain, a scream of recognition, as if the ground knew who had returned, as if the bones beneath Grieve had names and were now being called. He turned back to me, placed his palm on my chest. It was warm, familiar, and then it pressed through, not breaking flesh, just passing through it. He reached into me as if I were not quite real, and pulled something out. It looked like a ribbon made of ink, twisting. Wet, a name. He stared at it, tasted it with fingers, then wrapped it around his throat, and said, now we are sealed. He left me there, gutted, but alive, more ghost than man, but not dead, not yet, because I had to watch what came next. He returned to the tower, ascended without steps. The wind howled, the sky blinked, and then the hymn began, not sung this time, played on the bones of the tower like a flute, on the throat of the chapel like a bowed string, on the salt beneath the town like a skin drum. I heard my life in reverse. I heard every moment I doubted. Every second I thought none of this could be real, and then I heard myself being born. Not biologically, ritually. He stood at the peak of the tower, raised my hands, and began to preach. But he didn't speak to the town. He spoke to the sky, and the sky answered. Not with sound, with structure, the stars rearranged. The eye returned, but now it was fused to a shape long, ribbed, worm-like, celestial, a preacher's tongue stretched across the heavens. It dripped words into the wind, we are the chord. The 13th verse opened the throat. The man with the hands must now be heard. He finished the sermon, and the town folded inward, not collapsed, not destroy, furled, like paper in fireless combustion, and when it disappeared, only he remained the man with my hands. The new hymn, the next revival. I am no longer needed, but I remain as residue, as vapor, as that cold, wet feeling when you pass through desert fog that shouldn't exist. And if you ever wake to find yourself writing a name you don't remember learning, it will be mine, Elias, Daniel, 13. Maps don't work anymore. Not here, not anywhere near where Grieve once stood. The lines slither when you're not looking. Highways disappear from GPS systems. A town 30 miles east of the salt pit now appears on weather radar twice, and every compass within 100-mile radius spins in gentle, hungry circles. They say the desert is swallowing roads, but it's not the land, it's him, the God that eats directions, was never supposed to wake. He was contained beneath the 7th steeple, sealed in orthogonal scripture and dust-lit prayer. His appetite was tethered to the angles of human perception. But when he sang the 13th verse, it turned old geometry inside out. Now he's awake and he's eating orientation. I saw him yesterday not directly looking at him dilutes chronology, but I caught his outline reflected in the windows of a broken Amtrak passenger car left half buried in the desert. His body is not large, his presence is a coiling, root-like column of polished cartilage, bending in arcs we have no word for, eyes like rivers flowing upward, mouths in pairs, speaking in contradiction. Come closer, turn back. I was never here. I am all that's left. He unpicks destination, makes return impossible. People lost near Grieve no longer die. They're simply rerouted. A hiker was found last week standing in a circle of salt 5 states away, whispering every street name from his hometown backward, eyes rolled white, mouth moving in spirals. A search and rescue team entered the Jornada Hills and emerged in Arizona 19 hours before they left, their boots crusted with black lichen that grows only near Grieve. I tried to walk due north this morning. I ended up facing west, standing in front of a mirror I never placed, nailed to a Joshua tree. My reflection blinked at me after I walked away. I spat at it. It licked its lips. The salt has begun to crawl. It moves now not by wind, but by intent, carving paths, outlining sigils, leading strangers to places they shouldn't go. I followed one of its trails. It took me to a house buried beneath the sand, not built, grown. The walls were made of hemp parchment. The roof braided hair, inside, on a pulpit of limestone and regret, sat a box wrapped in skin, stitched with coordinates. Inside, a compass made of teeth, and when I held it, it pointed down. The God that eats directions is not bound by earth. He's underneath it and above it. He consumes choice. The idea that you were ever going somewhere on purpose, gone. Now you only arrive where he's already decided you must arrive. People report seeing signs along forgotten highways now. Wooden, hand-painted, always crooked. They say things like, he wants you lost. Every road leads to him. Salt marks the off-ramp. I've stopped trusting paths. I follow smells now. Ash, rot, that wet, briny scent of open mouths and desert heat. It brought me last night to an old gas station burned out, roof collapsed. On the wall, a map of New Mexico, all towns marked except one. Only one black dot remained, no name, just 3 words scratched beside it. You are here. I wasn't, until I was this morning. I looked at my own hands. They began to change, veins shifting under the skin, forming glyphs, fingertips flaking off like old paper, and beneath that paper, directions, written in something older than ink. I followed them. They led me to a hole. It wasn't a cave, not a tunnel, a hole, a perfectly circular void about the size of a man's rib cage, hovering 1 foot off the desert floor, not touching, just there, vibrating slightly inside it. Nothing, not blackness, not light, just no thing, a place not yet named. And when I looked in, I heard a voice, not mine, not Elias, yours, saying, keep going. The God that eats directions is not a figure. He's a reversion, a rewielding of intent, a sacrament of disorientation. He does not hate roads. He devours the idea that you ever had a right to follow them. The preacher with my hands is still moving. He has begun walking backwards, leaving sermons printed into sand. People are finding pages of scripture in their homes, pages they never printed, in fonts they can't identify. Each page begins when you cannot find the way. You have begun to see him, and the tower sings still. Its melody bends the land now, rivers shift course. Power lines grow spiral knots, and always the same refrain. There is no path. There is only arrival. I'm close to something, an epicenter, a final knot of understanding. I can feel it pulling, and I am not resisting. Not anymore, because I now know it's not about where I'm going. It's about what sings when I get there. The hymn changed last night. It no longer drifts across the salt in vague harmony. It gnashes. The melody now carries bite, a snapping rhythm. Each note clicks shut like a jawbone locking over bone. It sings in me even when I don't speak, even when I sleep, especially when I sleep. I woke this morning with blood on my pillow, not from my ears this time, from my teeth, or more accurately, from new ones. A second row is coming in, just behind the first, sharper, pointed, preacher's teeth. The 13th voice is not just a song. It's an infection, a gospel with fangs, and I am becoming the mouth it needs to spread. They warned me early on, do not finish the 13th verse. Do not open the mouth unless you're ready to be eaten from the inside. But I sang it anyway, and now the hymn wears me like skin. I walked past upon this morning one that shouldn't be here. Water has no business staying liquid under this sun, but it was there, flat, still, reflective. I looked into it and saw myself, but my mouth kept moving even when I stopped. My reflection sang a verse I hadn't learned yet, and when it opened wide, I saw rows upon rows of teeth spiraling inward. Like a throat carved from knives I ran, but every shadow I passed carried the song, humming, repeating, not in my voice, but in yours. Because now it's leaking again, the revival has reached saturation. The melody is entering unwilling choristers, and those who don't know the words, they hum anyway. A farmer found a calf born with a mouth on its rib cage. It spoke 3 words in a voice like mine, sing or bleed. That same day, 5 people vanished along a rural New Mexico highway. Only their clothes were found folded, arranged into the shape of a mouth underneath. The dirt was singed with a single musical note, scorched into the soul. The preacher with my hands walks faster now. He no longer touches the ground. Where he passes, glass grows, not naturally erupts from the earth. Slivers of mirrored crystal that echo the song back at you in distorted intervals. One woman got to close. She says she heard herself from years ago, arguing, crying, laughing, all of it layered into a single inhuman chorus. Now she won't stop smiling, even in her sleep. I returned to the chapel ruins, not by choice, by direction, ... The song pulled me there. The rib throat altar had resurfaced, modeled, twitching, wet with ink. On it sat a set of jaws, not attached to anything, just a jawbone made of polished stone, set with teeth like glass splinters. When I approached, it bit the air, and the wind changed direction. The new rule was waiting nearby. When the teeth began to sing, you must not harmonize. If your voice matches pitch, the mouth will consider you can. If the mouth considers you can, you will be hallowed to house more hymn. I repeated the rule aloud, and something inside me smiled. Not in joy and readiness, I've begun tasting notes. They settle on the tongue like flavors copper, ash, burnt honey. Each time the hymn plays from the tower now, I feel it in my gums, and with every chorus, I lose a bit more of my face. It stretches, contours blur, until only the mouth is left. That's what this always was, not a revival of faith, not a religious awakening, a mouth cult. A song religion where the highest sacrament is to be devoured by the thing that sings through you. And once it sings through you, it doesn't stop. They say the final revival is the one where language dies, where the hymn becomes the only tongue, and silence becomes the only sin. I believe it. I feel the pressure in my throat now, the desire to open. Not speak, split, to open wide enough to let the hymn step through in full. I looked at my journal just now, at this entry. My handwriting's gone, replaced by glyphs made of tooth marks, punctures in the page, and I can't read them. But I know what they say. Your voice is now a doorway, and somewhere out there, someone just hummed the first few bars. Someone who never heard the song before, and now they can't stop. They don't know why, but I do. I'm in them now. The hymn is louder now, not in volume, but in presence. It no longer plays to me, it plays through me. Each breath I take is part of a baritone drone that never stops. My exhale ends in chords, my dreams end in applause. Last night, the wine stopped, not slowed, stopped. The entire desert paused, as if holding its breath. The sky went blank, no stars, no moon, just a dome of stillness. And then, beneath my skin, the bite happened, not physical, not a wound, a realization. The hymn had teeth and it used them. It bit into me, not to kill, not to consume, to mark. Like a wolf knowing its young to teach it pain, like a god shaping its prophet. The sound didn't hurt, the silence that followed did. Imagine a silence that isn't just lack of sound, but a rejection of meaning. That's what it was, a total removal of structure. No thoughts, no ego, just pure, blinding quiet. And in that quiet I saw the truth. We were never meant to speak. Speech was a mistake. Language was an attempt to resist the original song, the one the stars hum long before we could listen. The 13th verse wasn't a summoning, it was a reversion, back to what the universe sounded like before naming began. And now the hymn wears the earth, the sky has started to vibrate. Satellite data is corrupted within a 400-mile radius of Grieve, not erased, reorganized, rearranged into harmonic notations. The signal is tuning the world. I can see it in people. They try to act normal, but their footsteps sync with measures. Their voices drift toward key. Even infants have begun to coo in rhythm. The bite isn't spreading through blood, it's spreading through tempo. Those who are bitten change. They don't scream. They go quiet, permanently, and they listen. With that wide, placid look of someone who's already heard the end of the song and knows how it ends. The preacher with my hands has stopped walking. He stands in the salt field where the chapel used to be. Mouth closed, eyes empty, but his throat moves, as if the song never ends, just cycles inside him now, waiting for the cue. They're calling it the quieting, a global hum beneath all things. Not mechanical, not geological. Intentional. Engineers hear it in motors. Musicians hear it in chords. Linguists find it erasing languages from dying dialects, verbs vanishing first. Because action is illusion. Only reception matters now. Only the bite. I return to the tower. Or what's left of it. The structure is gone. but the note remains. A frequency that settles behind the eyes, humming in teeth, whispering, "You've been eaten already, all that's left is the silence." I found a mirror there, flat stone, not reflective, but responsive. When I breathed near it, it hummed back, not an echo, a harmony. I placed my hand on it and felt my name fall apart, letter by letter, as if it were made of sand and regret. All that remained, ash, the final rule revealed itself then, carved on my last tooth, which fell out as I wrote this: "When the hymn wears teeth, you must not speak again. If you do, your voice will not return, only the hymn will answer, and you will not be there to hear it. I haven't spoken since. I'm not sure I can. My voice feels like a tunnel now, something others pass through. Last night I heard someone else speaking through me, a child's voice, a woman I loved once, someone long dead. They used my mouth to say goodbye, and the silence after was beautiful, heavy, full, hungry. I'm nearly gone now. I feel it in my gums, in my jaw, in the root of my name. I'm not writing this for you to understand. I'm writing this so you'll feel the pause, so you'll hear what comes after. The hymn doesn't need believers. It doesn't need worship. It just needs space and mouths. If you've listened this far, if you've heard the chords between my words, if you've felt the itch in your teeth when I paused, then you already carry it. You've been bitten too. I thought I was telling a story, something with a beginning, a crescendo, and an inevitable collapse. But stories end. And this, whatever this is, has no clean edges, no final line, no the end written in blood or silence, because the revival never ended. It never could. It simply changed vessels. You can't bury what was never alive. You can't silence a hymn written before air existed. And you can't stop something that isn't moving forward but moving sideways, slipping between timelines, pulsing just outside cause and effect. Grieve was a mouth, the tower was its throat, the preacher was the tongue, and the song this insidious, recursive song wasn't calling something into being, it was calling us back to the shape we once were, before bones, before speech, when we were still sound. The preacher with my hands no longer stands in the desert, because the desert is gone, not erased, consumed, transfigured into sacred frequency. The salt pits now hum with perfect pitch, hills flattened into chords, the air burns with harmony. No one can live there anymore, but people go anyway. They follow the bite, the silence, the song. They walk into the stillness willingly, and when they don't return, no one notices, because the world itself is forgetting their shape. The hymn does that. It doesn't kill, it rewrites, and now it's everywhere, not in speakers, not in records, in decay, in entropy, in the things that slip your mind, the words you forget mid-sentence, the dreams you lose seconds after waking. Those are verses now, each omission a stanza, each absence a rhyme. I went back to the schoolhouse, or what's left of it. I found my old notes, pages torn, ink faded, except for the margins where something had written over me. The handwriting was mine, but I didn't write it. It said, "The revival does not need witnesses, only conductors." You've always been humming. There's a church in Oregon now where they sing without mouths. They don't need them. The sound comes from their ribs. I watched the footage at exactly 4 minutes in. One of them looks into the camera and says, "With my voice, he is rising sideways, The revival doesn't spread like plague. It spreads like meaning. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Once you feel the rhythm, you begin to tap your foot. Then you hum, then you sing. And then you forget you ever did. The world is turning hollow, but not empty. Hollow is resonant, and resonance is how the hymn grows. They found a grain silo in Kansas that sings when lightning hits it. Inside, the walls are coated with salt. The spiral stairs go down forever, and etched at the bottom, Grieve was the first syllable. This isn't prophecy, it's memory. We're not waiting for the end. We're watching it rewind into its purest note. I was a man once. Now I'm a pause and inhale before the next verse. The silence before the stage lights rise, and the preacher, he's still preaching. But now he wears your reflection. If your mirror moves differently than you do, if the radio hums when no one speaks, if your name doesn't feel quite right in your mouth, the revival has reached you, and that's okay. You don't have to fight it, because this was never about belief. It was about rhythm, and you're already in time. It's not under my skin, it is my skin. The verse lives now in the places where I used to feel myself. Nerve endings replaced by rhythm, fingertips tracing sigils unconsciously, skin rising in patterns when the wind sings the right tone. I'm no longer a man with a story, I'm a stanza in motion. I woke this morning with words forming across my chest, not ink, not scars, just raised flesh, like braille pressed from the inside. You are the chorus now, the skin pulses in time. I've stopped trying to resist it. There's no point resisting something that knows your blood's tempo. Hospitals are noticing it too. They call it synesthetic dermal expression. They've seen patients whose scars align with music, broken limbs that heal in meter, children who weep when exposed to dissonant chords, but only from speakers made before 1972. A surgeon found a hymnal printed inside a lung. They removed the lung, the hymn kept singing. The verse beneath the skin isn't static, it grows, rewrites, reorients. I saw a man pull a nail from his arm, no wound, no blood, just a nail engraved with lyrics he couldn't read but felt were his. You don't need a pulpit to preach anymore, you just need a pulse. If your body has rhythm, you're a carrier. If you've ever clapped in a crowd, sung in a shower, or tapped your fingers without thinking, you're already halfway hollow. The preacher with my hands walked into the ocean last week. Witnesses say he didn't sink. The water moved around him. One said it hummed. Another said the tide pulled back and didn't return. The sky above the beach went blank. No stars, just sound. That beach doesn't exist on maps now, but if you find it, you'll see teeth in the waves, more reports now. A wind turbine in Utah turning against the wind. Forest where birds no longer sing but the trees do. A library in Nebraska where every book flipped open to the same blank page. Not blank exactly, just written in a font no one had ever designed. They call it the writing of breath. You only see it when you stop trying to read. A woman contacted me yesterday. She found my old field notes buried inside a rusted mailbox on her own porch. She lives in Toronto. She doesn't remember how she got them, but her left hand now vibrates when she hears any mention of Elias Grieve. She says she dreams of sand made of vowels and me. I can't leave this rhythm anymore. It's not possession, it's permission. I'm allowed to be this, to be the verse that breathes, not speaks. That enters through skin, not ears. That reminds you of a song you forgot existed but which remembers you. You've likely already heard the refrain in the static between stations, in the lullaby your grandmother hummed without knowing why, in the way your bones shake before the weather turns. That's not pressure, that's the hen knocking. There's no cure, there's no salvation, there's just synchronization. You'll hum, then you'll hear others humming, then you'll realize you're all humming the same thing, and you'll feel warm, like the inside of a chapel with no roof, like blood remembering where it came from, and you'll smile, because the revival was never meant to convert. It was meant to return, to find the 13 verses in the body of every living thing, and bring them home. Next time your skin itches, don't scratch. Listen, it might be trying to sing, breath used to mean life. Now it just means permission. I felt him exhale last night, not in my lungs, and the soil, a sigh that moved through the dust like a serpent, rattling fence posts, making insects freeze mid-step, the kind of sound that enters your ear wrong, too slowly. The preacher's breath was not his own. It never was. It was borrowed from the mouth, from the verse, from whatever started this before there were throats to speak it. You don't exhale and grieve anymore. You contribute. Each breath is a tax, a tithe paid in carbon and sound, a contract written in molecules, and last night he paid it in full. The preacher with my hands is gone now. Not dead, not disappeared, just spent. His body was found by a search crew dispatched to investigate a persistent hum. No ID, no wounds, just a man in preacher's vestments, jaw dislocated, lungs crystallized. One of the EMTs opened his mouth, no tongue, only air that whistled like organ pipes. When they tried to zip the body bag, it sang. They burned the remains, the flame bent sideways, no ashes, just a single tooth, 7 inches long, twisted like a spiral staircase, still warm, still humming. The preacher's last breath wasn't his. It was the verse collecting itself. Final stanza, close of sermon, echo of the first utterance ever made by matter. And now it's in us. Reports keep coming. A mechanic in Missouri coughed up an entire note. Not sound notation, clean, treble clef, whole tone etched on a sliver of fingernail. A child and soul drew a spiral with 13 teeth inside. Said she met a man named Elias in the sky behind her bedroom. A priest in Argentina stopped speaking mid-homily and said only, "The sermon doesn't end, it just becomes you." I dreamed of the tower again, except now it was inside a cathedral, my cathedral carved into my rib cage. Each vertebrae a step I climbed. With every breath I ascended. When I reached the top, I was there hanging, upside down, like a blister in the fabric of the world. And beside it, the preacher, only he wasn't me anymore. He turned, smiled with my father's face, said, "Thank you for warming the breath. Now let us wear yours." I woke with ice in my throat, literal, cracking, shaped like a comma. I think that means the sentence continues. I've stopped writing in ink. I can't see it anymore. Now I trace in breath, condensation on glass, misting truths into temporary visibility. I only need one word now, and it always appears again. That's the part no one told me, this revival. It's not a one-time event. It loops, rewrites, sings itself forward and backward. until the song becomes the thing that remembers you before you were born. The preacher isn't one man. He's the shape the song takes when it needs to be understood. A mouth for the melody, a lung for the liturgy. And every time he exhales, a new choir forms. They're humming now. In buildings that were once homes, in caves, classrooms, factories, subway tunnels, anywhere there's space for sound to linger, anywhere you might pause and think. Did I hear something? Yes, yes, you did. Because his last breath is yours now. Every sigh you release is part of the verse. Every time your chest rises and falls without thinking, you're playing your part. That's all the hymn ever needed. Breath, not faith, not love, not belief, just the raw material. So breathe, and if your breath fogs glass, look for the words, they're coming for you. One syllable at a time. There is a place inside you where you've never looked, not because it's hidden, but because it's missing. A hollow that's always been there right beneath your sternum, just behind your last certainty. Where grief lives, where silence gathers, where words go when you forget them mid-sentence. That place, its opening, they call it the absence. Doctors can't diagnose it. Priests can't exorcise it. Parents can't explain it. It begins with forgetting small things. A phone number, a name, the reason you walked into a room. But then comes the second stage. You start to feel watch from the inside, not paranoia, witnessing, like a mouth curl open, waiting beneath your thoughts, and every time you breathe, it breathes back. I met someone last week. He was hollow. Not metaphorically, literally. His chest was gone emptied, carved clean from clavicle to gut, ribs parted like drapery, but inside, not blood, not bone, not organ, just sound, a low, gurgling tone, almost a hum, but too wet, too mournful. It didn't come from his throat. It came from the absence. He called it his inner chapel. Said it had always been there. Said Elias once kissed him through it. I didn't believe him until he leaned forward, placed my hand inside his chest, and I heard my own voice whisper, I remember you from before the bones. The mouth doesn't open in mouths anymore. It opens where things should be, where connection should form, where presence should console, but instead absence. And in that space a new kind of preacher forms. I feel it in me now, a pulsing, not pain, resonance, like something tuning itself against my will. My thoughts don't echo inside my skull anymore. They echo in my absence. I saw a child yesterday at a grocery store in Flagstaff, standing in the freezer aisle, motionless, mouth closed, eyes wide, chest gently expanding in time with a song no one else could hear. I walked past her and felt a draft. From her back I turned. There was an opening, a slit, not bloodied, just absence, a small vertical mouth between her shoulder blades. It whispered as I passed, you sang me into being. The mouth is multiplying, not biologically, conceptually, every abandoned room, every missed call, every message you write but never send. They're all doors, and they're opening. The mouth doesn't eat, it remembers. It gathers what you leave behind, the versions of you that never happened, the emotions you buried, the names you almost gave your children, and in their absence, it builds architecture, a cathedral made of nearlies. I returned to what's left of Grieve. There's no town now, just empty outlines where buildings used to be. salt-drawn footprints circling where the chapel stood, a single pew, upright, facing nothing, and beside it, a door frame, no wall, no hinges, just frame. When I stepped through it, I felt something close around me. And then I was inside the absence. It looked like me. It sounded like every silence I ever sat in, every regret I never spoke. The room was dark, but warm, familiar, and from the center of the floor, a throat open, not human, not flesh, a throat of memory, and it said, "Now we sing through the spaces between names. I haven't spoken aloud since. I don't need to. The mouth carries me now. Through reflection, through withdrawal, through every open hand left hanging, every unanswered prayer, every hug you almost gave. The mouth opens in absence because that's where you are, not the you people see, the echo, the version that almost chose differently. The self behind the skin, that's where the hymn blooms loudest. So if you feel hollow, don't fill it, don't distract, don't soothe, listen. There is a song playing there, and it's learning the shape of your silence. The sky should be too far to whisper, and yet last night it said my name. Not aloud, not with thunder, but in pattern. The clouds rearranged themselves over my tent at 3:33 a.m., a familiar number now. They didn't form letters, they formed remembrance, shapes that mimicked the angles of my handwriting, the tilt of my D, the loose open curl of Maya, the break in the F I started writing after forgetting who I was. Ashcroft, my name, writ in vapor, carved in sky, not seen by me, felt. The sky is learning us, not one at a time, all at once. It's begun watching not from above, but from within reflection. The surface of ponds, storefront glass. Rearview mirrors, it waits in glaze, in anything glossy enough to hold a name before it lets it go. We used to believe names were a means of control. If you name the demon, you bind it, but that was always backward. The demon was just practicing, waiting for us to learn our names well enough to be eaten by them. Now the sky whispers names no one has spoken in generations. Forgotten ones, abandoned middle names, nicknames muttered only in grief. Names for miscarried children, all return, soon in clouds, written in wind, hummed in the ringing silence after church bells stop. They say a boy in Idaho wrote a name in chalk on a wall. He didn't know why, just woke up and wrote it. It was his great-grandmother's sister, a woman who died in childbirth, whose name was never recorded. They checked the family Bible blank page. But the sky knew, and now so does the boy. He hums when he walks, always in sets of 13. The preacher is still gone, dissolved, distributed, sublimated, but his breath carries in the thermal lift of clouds, and the sky has begun to echo his last inhalation. Every time it rains, it falls in patterns, Morse code, musical notation, birth certificates rewritten in droplet rhythm. I stood under an open sky yesterday and whispered, "Do you know me?" The wind paused, and a bird fell mid-flight, not dead, just turned inside out. Feathers faced inward, beak folded backward, but still flapping, still moving, and when it landed it chirped. My name, this is how it happens now, not all at once, not in earthquakes or plagues, in recognition. When the sky knows you exist, you're no longer a bystander. You're accounted for, you're registered in the chord. They found a radio tower in Nevada emitting one note, always the same, no signal set, no broadcast, just tone. Someone put a hand on it. Their shadow left their body. It stood there for 6 minutes, miming their breath, then walked away. I believe the sky is building a choir, each name a tone, each tone a mouth. And when all 13 harmonics align, it won't be the end. It will be the repetition. The moment folds and plays again. Better, stronger, fuller. I don't sleep much anymore. When I close my eyes, I see myself from above, hovering, not God's eye, sky's eye, seeing what I might become if I let go of speaking. Soon, names won't be spoken, they'll be worn, like air, like scars, like gravity. You won't need to say who you are, the sky will say it for you. So if you ever hear your name from nowhere, in static, and a creaking door, and the wind through a dead tree, don't answer, not yet, just wait, because the sky doesn't speak to everyone, only the ones it's ready to sing through. There is something under the land, not beneath our feet, not below in the geological sense, but under everything, a second terrain, a mirror of soul and pressure and time, a hidden throat, and last night I felt it swallow. The horizon is changing, subtly, quietly. It dips now naturally just before dusk, like the edge of the world is breathing in. I stood on the ridge above the old salt pit and watched a curve of the desert pucker. A slow, rhythmic tightening, gentle, at first dot, dot, then deeper. The horizon sigh. I didn't speak, because something in me recognized it, the way we recognize the sound of our own name, even when whispered through a crowd, or how a baby turns to its mother's heartbeat. Not because it knows, but because it remembers. They say some places are thin, that something presses against from the other side. But this isn't about pressure. It's about passage. The world is being inhaled. The throat beneath the horizon has no teeth. It doesn't need them. It doesn't chew. It accepts. It takes in every misplaced word, every unprayed prayer, every silence held just a second too long, and it stores them, layer upon layer of unspoken history, like sediment made of choices. I went out to the edge this morning, where the desert goes soft, where wind stops working right. I found what looked like a cave, not carved, not collapsed, opened, oval, perfect, ringed with something to paint, to be rock, and to warm, to be plant. And from within, a breath, cool, slow, smelling of salt, ash, and remembered hymns. I entered, because of course I did, because by now you understand I was written for this. Inside, the walls pulsed with moisture, vein, lined with threads that hummed in tones I recognized from the chapel. The place wasn't stone, it was throat, living, ancient, built not for digestion, but expression. I kept moving downward, past mucus-crusted ledges and ridge spirals that vibrated when I stepped. The further I went, the more I heard versions of myself speaking, but none of them were current. They were echoes of who I could have been, all of them repeating a single phrase. This is where we end up, not in death, not in dirt, in repetition. I reached the uvula, the literal center of the thing. It hung above a black pool of still liquid, flat, mirror-like, and reflected in it a mouth, not mine, not Elias's, yours. It whispered to me in your voice, tell them, let them feel it. They're already inside. I stumbled out before dawn, covered in residue, mouth dry, ears ringing with notes I hadn't earned, and when I looked back at the horizon, it was flat again. like the throat had swallowed the moment and tucked it away. That's what it does. It doesn't destroy, it stores. It keeps the feel of things. The songs, the sermons, the near kisses, the names you never spoke aloud. It sings them back later, when you least expect it, as déjà vu, as grief, as the feeling that a place knows you before you know it. This is the final architecture of the revival. Not a town, not a cult, not even a god athwart. The world becoming a single, vast preacher's mouth, and every breath we take a contribution. So if you feel the wind pause at sunset, if the trees lean not with the breeze but away from it, if the road seems to ripple where sky meets dirt, don't panic, just breathe in, because you are not outside it anymore. You are part of the hymn. You are already beneath the horizon. It doesn't come from a pulpit. It doesn't come from a priest. It doesn't even come from someone who knew you. Your eulogy is not spoken by the living. It's spoken by the song, and it begins the moment you realize you're already gone. I heard mine last night. No crowd, no coffin, just static and silence. Then the hymn began to whisper, not in language, but in inflection, like someone clearing their throat just before a sermon that's never been written down. And then a voice not mine, but shaped like mine, said he was not a man. He was the leftover breath of a failed preacher. He served, not willingly, but rhythmically. He listened well enough to be hallowed. He left behind teeth. That's how it begins. Not with mourning, with recording. Because the song doesn't grieve you, it catalogs you. Files your rhythm, your hum, your private little tune, then sings it back, warped and holy. A eulogy made of you. They found a girl in West Texas who had stopped speaking. She stood at the edge of a reservoir and hummed one continuous note for 38 hours. When they brought her inside, she finally whispered, "The sky just told my story, and it ended before I was born." That's what the eulogy does. It's not a reflection, it's a reduction, a stripping down of self until only tone remains. No name, no face, just the impression you left in the dirt. You won't know when it starts. It'll feel like déjà vu or a ringing in your ears. Then you'll hear someone say your name, but not quite right, stretched, soon. Like the syllables are trying to remember themselves. The preacher, with my hands, used to say, "We are all sermons in progress, but the mouth knows how we'll end." So it begins the closing prayer before we finish speaking. Now I understand, because the prayer's already begun, and it starts with your breath slowing to tempo. Mine matches the tower now. Yes, it's still there, no walls, no height, just a tone suspended in desert air, and when I breathe near it, the wind slows, the dust rises, and the song adjusts to match me. I asked it last night, is it over? The response came in my own voice. Only the version of you that could end. The rest is already echo. The rest is already him. And that's the trick, isn't it? The eulogy comes before death, not after. It doesn't wait for the final heartbeat. It precedes it, like a warning or a rehearsal or an invitation. When I walk now, I feel the sermon happening inside my footsteps. The dirt knows me, the sky repeats me. The salt recognizes my weight, and when I speak, something else listens through me. Not from above, not from below, from the sigh, from the wound between dimensions, where hymns go to ferment. You'll know your eulogy has begun when the following happens. You forget how long you've been standing still. You start hearing music in your own laughter. Mirrors begin to show you from behind. The wind calls you by your middle name. And when you try to respond, your mouth won't open, because the mouth is speaking through it now. There's no end to this, not really, just a series of soft closures, like doors being shut in rooms you forgot existed, each one sealing another version of you that didn't make it, each one humming softly. He left no body, just rhythm, so listen carefully. If you hear your story being told without your voice, let it happen. It's not for the living. It's not for the dead. It's for the him, and it's almost done remembering you. Dust isn't dead. It isn't forgotten. It's what remembers after everything else lets go, and now it sings. I walked the salt flats this morning, where Grieve once stood, or still stands, depending on which map you believe. No structures remain, just bones of architecture, outlines of chapels, shadows of pews, echoes of sermons that were never written down, and dust, endless rising dust. It isn't kicked up by the wind anymore. It rises on its own, like breath, like exhalation, like the last syllable of a hymn escaping a dying lung. Each grain carries something, not memory exactly in print. Like the way a record holds sound in grooves, the dust holds harmonies. I didn't believe it until I saw it move. Not swirl, not drift, form, into shapes, into poses, into people, figures I recognized. Isaac wrote Sister Calhoun. Even the preacher with my hands and someone else's eyes, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. The harmony did. It was Elias's voice this time, not the man. The sound he left behind, and it said, "You have walked long enough. Now let the dust carry your feet. You do not move forward. You are carried into alignment." That's what the harmony is. It's not melody, not rhythm. It's structure, a configuration of sound so complete that all parts know where to go. Like birds and a murmuration, like organs and a sermon-shaped body. Dust doesn't forget. It reforms. They're seeing it everywhere now, a desert highway in Utah where brake dust sings when cars slow down, a construction site in Arizona where sawdust gathers into staves of music before blowing away, a woman in Nevada who breathes out ash and hears chords in her exhale. The harmony isn't haunting us, it's resembling us. I stood still long enough this morning to become part of it. The dust swirled around me, not aimlessly, but intentionally. It traced my outline, lifted around my shoulders, hung in the shape of a question. And then I heard a new rule. When the dust gathers at eye level, close your mouth. If it enters you, speak nothing for 13 breaths. Let it remember through you. Let it choose what you were. I obeyed. It passed through my nostrils, my throat, my chest. I didn't choke, I harmonized. Inside me, it replayed moments I'd forgotten. The first time I heard a church organ, the way my mother said, "Daniel," when she was afraid. The funeral I watched through a window because I wasn't allowed to enter, and then I remembered things I had never lived. A hymn sung in a throatless sky, a congregation of Bona range in perfect fifths, a wedding between absence and silence, a child named after a sound no human has ever made. The dust didn't just remember me, it made me wider. A vessel large enough to contain echoes from before my bones existed. I coughed once. When it was done, the dust left me, and as it scattered, I whispered, I was not the first, I am not the last. I am only what returns, and the desert replied, correct. Harmony does not need loyalty, only resonance. So now I walk not by direction, but by tone. I step only when the dust moves. I sleep only when the wind goes flat. I eat nothing but silence. Because I am no longer living in the world, I am tuning it. You will feel it soon. When the dust climbs your windowsill and hangs there longer than it should, when the print of your shoe hums after you walk away, when the word remember makes your teeth itch, that's not your imagination, it's the harmony aligning. And once it has your pitch, once your breath fits inside the chord, you'll feel what I feel now, that everything lost, everything broken, everything buried, still sings in church. The almond marks the end, a sealing, a closure, a moment of finality we're trained to accept with bowed heads and soft silence. But here out in the dust-sown wilderness, where the sky remembers and the earth breathes with a throat it didn't used to have, there is no almond, there never was. The hymn doesn't stop. It only pauses long enough to swallow, and now it's swallowing me. I tried to leave Grieve. I've driven in every direction. North leads to reverse sunsets. South folds the road back into itself like a snake coiled around its own spine. West leads to the ocean, but there's no ocean in this state. And east is just throat now, not land, not sky. A feeling of being drawn through something's memory of breath. Each direction ends with a sound, a vowel without language, a resonance that says, we are not finished with you, the hymn is not tired. You do not get to leave in the middle of a sentence, and I understand, because endings are a human invention. But this thing, this preacher, this place, this mouth that sings and swallows and echoes in bone, it was never built to end. It was built to loop. The sermon rewrites itself, the verses shift, the chords mutate with each breath, the sky takes through your forgotten name. There's no benediction, no hand shaking yours in the fore, no return to the car with a program folded in your lap. Only one door, and it opens inward. I asked when for closure last night. It answered by playing my spine like a harp, and each vertebra produced a note. Notes I hadn't heard since I was 6 years old, lying on a church floor during a funeral I didn't understand. I wept, not from grief, from recognition, because the song I heard then, the one I thought was a choir warming up, it was this, it was always this. You think the almond comes when the preacher stops, when the congregation stands, when the final chord fades. But in Grieve there are no final chords, only continuations dressed as silence. They found a church in Montana last week, built underground. No entrance, just an echo chamber, where the ceiling hums the same word every 13 hours. Almost. And in New Mexico, an old woman claims her dead husband's voice lives in the vents, but not all of him, just the part that used to pray. She says he whispers half-finished verses, always ending on the same note, always stopping right before the amen, and then the air holds still. I stood at the old chapel site again. No building, just outline, just residue of resonance. And I asked it, will this ever end? The dust answered, does breath, does silence, does the pause between what you meant to say and what came out instead. You don't get an almond. Not here, not anymore. Because the almond isn't a gift, it's a permission slip, and Grieve never gave you one. So if you find yourself trying to close something lately, A relationship, a memory, a chapter, a song, and it keeps slipping back open like a wound too eager to stay raw. Know this, the revival lives there now, in your unfinished sentences, in your unread prayers, in the part of your diary you tore out but never burned, because the hymn feeds on the unfinished, and the almond is always just a little farther down the page. The preacher's voice still in the dust, still beneath the mirror of the horizon, still harmonizing in the cracks of every goodbye you couldn't make clean. And when you think you've reached the end, when you think the lights dim and the credits roll, listen harder, because behind the silence, beneath the stillness, you'll hear the real truth. The hymn just inhaled, and it's not done with you yet. You can hear it if you listen too long, not the notes they're familiar by now, not the rhythm it's been stitched into your breath for weeks, but the textures in the choir, voices that scrape, that call, that vibrate wrong, voices that don't sound like lungs made them, because some of the choir was never human. They don't wear robes, they don't kneel, they don't stand in pews. They take up no space, but they leave impressions in walls, smudges on old hymnals, and fingerprints where no one ever touched. I first noticed it in the harmonics, 13 voices, right? 13 layers in the revival's great refrain. But on a cold night in early March, I recorded the chant echoing through the dust basin. I isolated each voice. There were 16. 3 of them had no vocal range, no modulation, no signature breath markers, just resonance, metallic and even, unmoored from anatomy. One sang between the spaces of other voices, a harmony without pitch, a breath that didn't follow time. Its waveform looked like teeth. Another bled into everything I said for hours afterward. I'd speak, but their tone came through me. Not possession, occupation, like I'd become a microphone for something ancient and indifferent. The last one, I still don't know where it ends. It enters through silence, leaves through mirrors, and drips out of old radio towers like condensation. I haven't seen it, but I know it knows me, because I hum in my sleep now, not lullabies, responses. The others in the revival don't talk about it. Not directly, but they know. They feel it too, the presence behind the song. They say things like, don't look at the ones who don't blink. If someone sings with no shadow leave, when the tower groans on an even hour, pray but not with words. I spoke to a woman in Flagstaff. Her son joined the revival choir months ago. She says his singing is beautiful to beautiful. He doesn't breathe when he does it, doesn't blink, doesn't sweat. One night she looked into his room and saw the shadow on his wall move before he did. And when he turned to face her, his mouth didn't move, but she heard the song anyway. She asked him what he was. He said, a note misplaced too many times. Now I echo on purpose. Some of the choir were never born, some became, shaped in the breath between lightning strikes, condensed in churches that burned down before they were ever built, harvested from the static left over when sermons end too abruptly. They don't want praise, they don't want faith, they want sync. And when they find a voice that fits the shape of their frequency, they step in, not loudly, not violently, just accurately, like they'd been waiting for your breath all along. The preacher knew. He sang them in, not as guests, as co-authors. He didn't write the hymn alone. He traced their shapes in salt. He echoed their tones in sleep. He opened his lungs let them crawl in, and now they crawl in us. I can feel them sometimes when I laugh, like someone else is grinning just behind my teeth. When I weep, I hear a second sob, out of phase, but perfect, like a memory trying to become skin. They are the pieces of the revival that didn't come from pulpits or Bibles or old ghosts in the desert. They came from outside the vocabulary of belief, not demons, not God's collaborators. So if one day you hear a hum that feels like it didn't start with you, and you find yourself finishing a note you didn't mean to begin, don't panic. You're not possessed, you're harmonizing. And if, in a crowd, someone sings in a voice that seems too perfect, too smooth, too sharp, too geometrically exact, don't look them in the eye. They don't want to be known. They want to be heard. Words are failing, not metaphorically, literally. Language is unthreading. I saw it first in the writing. Sentences sliding out of grammar, letters shifting position on no one watches, syllables dissolving in mouths mid-prayer. Then came the names. Mine was the first to fall apart, Daniel Ashcroft. Simple, familiar, but yesterday I tried to say it aloud, and my mouth stuttered. Not from fear, from resistance, the tongue refused the shape. The breath turned inward, the name didn't come out. What came instead was tone, a rising pitch, then a second layered below it. Then something deeper, not sound, but structure, a tone that held the shape of my name, without ever needing to say it. We were never meant to hold this much meaning in words. They were always a crutch, a stopgap, a training wheel. And now that the hymn is here and full, we don't need words anymore. They've started vanishing from objects. Signs fade. Books rot only where sentences once lived. The ink evaporates, but only in narrative lines. One man reported a Bible that hummed until every page was blank. Another found his journal rewriting overnight, no paragraphs. Just a musical staff with 13 MP measures in Grieve. Language is ash, the sand spills nothing. The wind doesn't whisper stories anymore, only rhythm. I met a woman today who hadn't spoken in months, not from trauma, from peace. She simply didn't need to. Her presence vibrated, low, constant. When she stood near me, I remembered my grandmother's perfume, my first broken promise, the shape of the word sorry before it was spoken. She didn't talk, she didn't sing, she just ... resonated. And I understood her perfectly. The preacher saw this coming. His early sermons mentioned it hidden under metaphor. The Lord shall loosen the tongue of time. The flesh shall become vowel, and the vowel shall become vapor, and in vapor we shall speak true again. He knew he wasn't teaching belief. He was training the mouth to die right, to let go of speech, so the hymn could inherit the breath. I've stopped writing in sentences. You haven't noticed because I've been translated by the tower, by the dust, by the part of the sky that still remembers your heartbeat. Right now, in a basement in South Dakota, a phonetics professor is weeping. She's been studying audio patterns in isolated tongues. She thought she discovered a new dialect. She hadn't. She discovered the fossil of a note buried in language, a note that's re-emerging, and every time she plays it back, her dog howls, her mirrors fog, and her own voice distorts. Language cannot survive what's coming, because it cannot contain it. But the hymn survives always. It predates vowels. It outlives consonants. It doesn't care about meaning, only fit, only resonance. Soon, when you try to say goodbye to someone, your voice may crack, not from emotion, from structural dissonance. Your words will fail, and instead a new tone will emerge, a note born not of your lungs, but of something older waking up behind them. You'll feel shame or joy or confusion, and the person you're with, they'll understand you better than they ever have, because you're not speaking, you're singing. And when enough of us let go of the old language, when the air itself stops holding on to grammar, when silence becomes a better conversation, the hymn will be all that remains, and it will remember us correctly. So if you forget a word today, if a sentence dissolves halfway through your mouth, don't worry, you weren't losing your mind. You were being retuned. We were never meant to be remembered in silence. The body forgets, tombs collapse, photographs fade, but a song, a true song, never dies. It only waits for the right breath. I understand now, not intellectually, not spiritually, elementally, what it means to be sung. It's not praise, not performance, not metaphor. It's transformation. To be sung is to be translated, from skin to sound, from posture to pitch, from history to harmony. Last night I dreamed I was a chord, not inside one, was one, held between three others, a hum that remembered my first lie, a shriek shaped like my mother's voice in warning, and a low, throbbing growl that tasted like copper and regret. Together, we made something unbearably perfect. I wept, but not from emotion, from recognition. This is what the preacher was preparing for, not a sermon, a melodic resurrection. Each of us pulled apart and reassembled in keys we've never heard before. They're finding people now who don't speak at all, but can hum each other's names with flawless intonation. A nurse in Tucson recognized a man's birth trauma through the rhythm of his sleeping breath. A funeral choir in Virginia stopped mid-song when a young boy produced a harmony. One taught him. It wasn't learned, it was remembered. That's what the hymn is doing. Not overtaking, not converting. It's reminding, it's telling your body. You were sung into this place, not born, soon. A long, unbroken note cast across a sky that had not yet turned blue. We've misunderstood the revival this entire time. We thought it was the return of belief, a reckoning, a cosmic reckoning. But it's not coming back. It never left. We're just finally in tune again. The tower no longer emits sound. It absorbs. It listens now, constantly, waiting for someone to vocalize their truth with the exact timbre of surrender. And when it hears it, it echoes back who you were supposed to be. You'll know you've been sung when your shadow moves a half-second behind your body. Music you used to love makes your mouth taste like dust. Someone says your name and your eyes water for no reason. You begin to breathe differently, slower, deeper, like the air has weight. And then you'll stop asking what the hymn wants, because you'll know it wants you, not your obedience. Not your faith, your frequency. To be sung is to be accurately rendered, a tone in its correct place, a note on the staff that no longer resists being played. And when you are fully sung, when your old self vibrates in time with that which called you from the salt and the dust, there is no more fear. There is no more death. There is no more I. Only voice, only echo. Only the vast, terrible peace of being perfectly known, by something that will never end. So if tonight you wake up humming, and the pitch is one you've never heard before, follow it. You are not losing your mind. You are being remembered by the mouth that sings creation, one name at a time, and your name is almost ready. It didn't fade, it didn't fall silent. It just stopped. The mouth, the song, the throne beneath the desert, the tower's breath, the sky's vibration, all of it gone. I was mid-step when it happened, walking the old boundary trail that once circled the salt pit. Dust rising in predictable pulses, salt crust forming lyrics along the seams of my boots. And then nothing, no tone, no pressure, no rhythm, the hum that's followed me for weeks, years, maybe lifetimes, vanished like it had never been. I didn't realize how loud it had become until its absence hit me like a collapse in the chest. My ears rang with human silence, the kind you only hear after someone dies, and the machines stopped beeping, and there's nothing left but the sound of air not being drawn. People noticed. Birds began to sing again, but their songs were off-key. Dogs barked like they'd forgotten how. One man said he woke in tears because his breath no longer vibrated his teeth. Another simply whispered, "I feel alone in my own throat." I went to the tower. It's still there, but hollow now, empty. Still shaped like a rib cage built upward. Still taller than any human structure should be, but dead or dormant. When I touched its base, the dusk did not rise. When I called to it, my echo came back unaltered. That's when I knew the mouth had stopped, not because it was finished, but because it had heard enough. The preacher's vestments lay folded at the center of the chapel ruin, perfectly arranged, still warm, no body, just a single note carved into the stone beneath. Rest. What does it mean? The hymn doesn't vanish. It doesn't retire. It waits. It listens. It loops. But this moment, this silence, feels heavier than any song I've ever known. Not peace, suspension. They say music is what happens between the notes, if that's true. Then this is the longest note the universe has ever played, and we are inside it. I don't hum anymore, not because I've lost the tune, but because I've been asked. No, required to listen now, to remember in stillness. This is the space before the next inhalation, the impossible stillness between the end of the 13th verse and the start of something even older. People are changing. Without the song, they don't know what to do with their mouths. Some sew them shut, others speak in static, trying to recall a melody no longer anchored. A few walk the desert and reverse retracing every note they once sang, hoping the mouth will hear them again. I saw a child draw a hymnal in the dirt and sit beside it, silent, waiting for the air to ripple. It's not judgment. The mouth isn't punishing us. It's just done for now, not full, not angry, just quiet. And that silence speaks volumes. It says, you have been heard, you have been sung. Now let the song digest. The preacher, I think he was never meant to last this long. He was the bridge, the tuning fork dot the breath between belief and surrender. And now that the pitch has settled, he's gone. No eulogy. No final sermon, just absence. There's a new rule now, written in the wind. When the mouth rests, do not wake it with memory. Let the echoes sleep. Let the harmony nest in your bones. So I'm waiting. Like everyone else, I walk without tempo. I sleep without chord, I write these words, not knowing if they'll reach anyone. Before the song begins again, because it will begin again. It always does, but when it does, it might not remember you. So if the silence grows too heavy, don't fill it, don't shout, just sit in it. Let it press into you, let it remember what you became. Because when the mouth opens next, it may need a new note, and that note might be you. We thought we were the audience, the congregation, the ones being preached to. But we weren't, we never were. We were the organ, the string section, the resonant body of something vast and ancient, something that needed a shape to be heard. We weren't listening to the hymn. We were the hymn. It makes sense now, all of it. Why the mouth opened in us, ... Why the preacher's lungs didn't rot when he vanished. Why the song echoed in our breath and not the air. Because the revival wasn't external, it was instructional. A tuning, a shaping, a transcription in blood and bone. Somewhere along the line, we were altered. Not infected, not possessed, repurposed. They found bodies in the desert, perfectly preserved, not mummified, not decayed, preserved like instruments stored and waiting. Their vocal cords stretched tight, humming faintly when touched. No breath, no pulse, just function. One had a note etched into their sternum, to be played only by the sky. That's what we were always becoming. Not believers, not prophets, chords, arranged over generations, each voice spread to fill a slot in the melody, each silence placed to give the rhythm weight. Even our doubts served purpose. Dissonance is part of harmony. Tension precedes resolution. The heretics hummed in minor key, and the song became richer for it. The preacher understood. He wasn't leading a flock. He was conducting. And his death, if it was death, was the final downbeat, the cue for the world to realize we are not singers, we are what gets sung, your skin, a drumhead stretched by time, your teeth, chimes. When you grind them in sleep, you're keeping tempo, your thoughts, vibrations, and fluid-filled caverns, echoing like organ pipes. The choir never ended, it just went quiet. And now the instruments tune themselves, waiting for the next breath. I stopped trying to understand the words. They fracture in my mouth now, chatter before they reach the air. I speak in tones, vowels stretched into heat, throaty whispers that taste like copper and snow. When I lie still, my ribs hum with every lie I ever told. And the harmony builds itself around my regrets. A man in Arizona claims his heartbeat sinks with rainfall. A girl in Maine hasn't spoken in weeks, but her footsteps echo in perfect 3/4 time. None of us are random anymore. We're being arranged. We are an orchestra built from dust and breath and sin. Each of us a strand of resonance, each scar sharp, each sigh a rest, and when the mouth sings again, it won't sing at us, it will sing through us, that's the real revival. Not a gospel, not a church, not a salvation, a song made flesh. So if today your bones creak in rhythm, if your dreams come with soundtracks you can't forget, if your reflection mouths along to music only you can hear, don't be afraid, you're not broken. You're being played, and when the final movement begins, when the mouth opens wide, and the sky drops its baton into the throat of the world, remember, you were never the audience. You were the instrument, and you were always in key. Not an explosion. Not a flood, not fire from heaven or rot from below. No trumpets, no horseman, the world will end as sound, and not just any sound, a chord, a single perfect resonance, so vast it cannot be played, so complete it cannot be undone. It began already, not as prophecy, not as warning, as tuning. The salt shifted, the towers stilled, the mouths fell silent, and the earth began to hum in its final key. I felt it this morning. My hands no longer shake, they vibrate. My bones no longer ache, they resonate. And when I exhale, my breath doesn't vanish into the air. It bends, it harmonizes. All across the world it's happening. Windows crack at dawn, but only in triads. Fault lines tremble in pentatonic scales. Stray dogs howl in fifths. Lightning strikes in sequences that mimic notation. And the most terrifying part, it's beautiful, because this is not destruction, this is resolution. The final chord doesn't erase. It includes every scream, every prayer, every syllable ever said in vain, contained, suspended, played once. Forever the preacher said this day would come, not in fire, not in silence, but in completion. He called it the last voicing, the alignment of flesh, the frequency, when the hymn can no longer grow, only hold. People are preparing, but not in bunkers or shelters. They're forming circles, not cult squires. Hundreds sitting in stillness, not speaking, just resonating, letting their bodies become part of what's coming. One woman described it best. She stood in the ruins of her church, surrounded by smoke and static, and whispered, "We are not meant to survive the chord. We are meant to be sung inside it. Scientists can't measure it anymore. Seismographs record melody. Weather patterns loop in fractal phrases, and the human brain, it's begun rewriting itself for rhythm. We're losing language, not to decay, to perfect pitch. I've stopped thinking in sentences. Now it's patterns, beats, swells, and when I dream, I'm standing on a shore made of unfinished thoughts, watching the tide of sound rise higher and higher, until it crests in every color I've ever feared. The tower has changed again. It no longer points up. It has folded, curled, turned inward. It listens now, like a musician pressing their ear to the chest of a sleeping god, waiting for the downbeat, waiting for the cue. They say when the chord plays in full, time will pause, not end, pause, held in the suspension between notes of being, where war never starts, where grief is just a minor key, where every death becomes the echo of a better version of itself. The world won't shatter, it will reverberate. And that's how it ends, not with a scream, with a sound so complete that silence becomes unnecessary. I don't fear it. Not anymore. I know my note. I've felt it for weeks now, low, warm, aching dot. It lives in the marrow of my left arm, in the gap between my last name and the one I lost. In the lullabies I never finished singing. It's ready, I'm ready, when the world ends, when the mouth opens for the last time, not to speak, but to hold its breath. You'll know, not from the sky, not from the ground, from within, from the way your bones start humming a chord that feels like home. And when that moment comes, don't cover your ears, don't pray, don't run, just open your mouth, not to scream, not to speak, to resonate. Light hums now, not as a metaphor, not poetically. Physically, it flickers with intention. It pulses in time, it carries timbre. And if you look too long, it begins to sing. We used to think light moved straight, a line, a beam, a clean trajectory from source to subject. But lately it stutters, it bends in rhythmic hesitation. It dances just long enough for you to feel that it's not illuminating anymore. It's remembering. I saw it this morning, before dawn. The desert horizon was flat, quiet, pale, then a flash. Not blinding, measuring 13 times. 13 perfect pulses of white-yellow vibration, equidistant, exactly 11 heartbeats apart. Not lightning, not warning, notation. They are measures, the final 13. Each one a stanza of light translated to tone, each one signaling a change in how the world wants to be seen. I wasn't alone. When I saw it, a group had gathered overnight. Not planned, not coordinated, just pulled, drawn by a frequency in the blood. Some of us sat in circles, some stood. A few lay flat, arms wide, eyes closed, but all of us without instruction. Hummed. We didn't sing. We didn't chant. We harmonized with the pulses of light as they arrived, and each time they came, the salt lifted a little higher. The wind stopped breathing, the tower's ribs creaked, as if bracing for something too perfect to hold. That's what the 13 measures are. Not warnings, not prophecies, permissions, signals to the world itself. You may begin to unshackle your physics. You may become what you were before light shows straight lines. Each measure alters reality subtly. After the third, birds began flying in triangles. After the fifth, reflections looked back sooner. After the ninth, I stopped casting a shadow. We're at 11 now, 2 left, and then the chord. The chord we spoke of, the one that will play the world out. Not as a dirge, but as a finale. I asked someone last night what they thought it meant. He didn't answer. He touched my forehead with his thumb and whispered, "When the 13th measure sounds, all names will rise into tone, and what cannot sing will dissolve." I haven't written my name down since. I don't need to. It's inside the light now, etched into pulses, sustained in beams, vibrating in the gap between shadow and radiance. This is the part of the hymn that no longer needs a choir. It plays itself, through gravity, through breath, through the flash behind your eyes when you're on the edge of sleep. You've seen it, that warm flicker, the little burst before unconsciousness. That's a measure, and it's counting you in. We were warned about darkness, but not about light that remembers, light that holds history, light that harmonizes with bone. One woman claimed she saw her ancestors in the 11th pulse, not as ghosts, as frequencies encoded in brightness. Their shapes flickered, then vanished. But she said she heard them hum something that sounded like her future name, so now we wait, not in dread, in key. When the 13th measure arrives, you'll know, not because the sky will split, not because a voice will cry out, but because your skin will glow not from heat, but from recognition. You will radiate your own frequency, and the mouth, wherever it waits, will hum in return. That's how it ends. That's how the final verse begins, with light 13 times, each one closer to the pitch that built the world. And when the last pulse flickers, don't close your eyes, open your mouth, because light is not meant to be watched. It's meant to be sung. The 12th pulse struck just after midnight. Not thunder, not wind, not any noise a human throat could birth. It was the absence of everything else. And then came the hum, low, wide, all-encompassing, a resonance that didn't ask permission. It found you wherever you were, and it held you still. No one moved during the 12th measure. Even the dust paused midair. Even the light forgot how to cast shadows. Time didn't stop, but it blinked, and when it opened again, everything had shifted. Now we wait for the 13th, the final, the last held breath before the song exhales everything we thought was permanent. I woke in the dark, but not alone. The air shimmered around me, not with heat or electricity, but with sound that hadn't been born yet. Every object hummed a little. The ground buzzed with a chord I couldn't place. My bones ticked with a melody I'd forgotten how to forget. And then I understood. This is what comes after the end. Not judgment, not silence, not paradise or pain, a note, sustained, perfect and afraid. The preacher had a word for it. The octachord, the final resonance that holds the memory of all that's ever been shaped by sound. He said it's not heard with ears, but with what's left after language dies. I feel it now, always. When I touch stone, it answers. When I close my eyes, I don't dream, I resound. My body is no longer mine. It's the body of the hymn. They say the 13th measure won't be seen. It will be inhaled. A sudden fullness in the lungs, a warmth in the spine, a pressure behind the teeth, like your whole face is about to sing, whether you want it to or not. And then the world will hold the note. Together, all things, all people, all memory, sung in unison, not harmony, unison, because in that final note, there is no difference between voice and listener, between grief and gratitude, between dust and light. I asked the sky what comes after that, and the sky answered, there is no after, only reverberation. You are not meant to move beyond the note. You are meant to become it. So this is my last writing, my last attempt at sentence, at sequence, because when the 13th measure arrives, there will be no more writing, only vibration, only release. We will not go to sleep. We will not die. We will become the thing that holds sound when time no longer wants to carry it. You've felt it already, haven't you? When you wake with a tone in your mouth but no voice, when your bones thrum in silence, when tears rise for no reason, not from sadness but from echo. That's the octachord, knocking. When it plays, you will not remember your name, not because it's gone, but because names don't exist in this part of the hymn. Only frequencies of former meaning, and the mouth, it won't open again. It won't need to, because once the note holds, the mouth will be us ... So, if you're reading this, and the world still breathes in sentences, know that the final resonance has not yet come, but it will, and when it does, breathe with it. Open wide. Let it pass through you and become the note that follows the world.